Welcome back to another night of darkness, brave souls. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true horror stories sent to me by real people. Stories that actually happened and left permanent marks on their lives. Each one made me pause when I first read it, and I knew immediately that I had to share them with you. Before we dive into tonight's accounts, I want to know, where are you watching from right now and what time is it? I love seeing how far these stories reach across the world, and it always reminds me that fear doesn't care about distance, time zones, or borders. It finds us wherever we are. So let's get started. Story 1. The Visitor Who Never Left. Before I read this first story, I should explain why it stayed with me longer than most submissions I receive. It came through my email late one night, buried between dozens of shorter accounts that I'd been sorting through. I almost skipped it entirely. The subject line was just, something that happened when I was young, with no other details. What stopped me from moving on was a single line in the opening paragraph about a sound that didn't belong in a quiet house. That detail lingered in my mind longer than it should have, pulling at something I couldn't quite name. The email was signed by someone named Eden, and he mentioned at the end that he'd never shared this story publicly before, not even with close friends. He said writing it down felt like excavating something he'd buried for years, and he wasn't sure he wanted to unbury it. But he sent it anyway. So let me share Eden's story exactly as it was sent to me in his own words. I was 6 years old when this happened. I was living with my older brother Marcus and my mother in a rented duplex near a drainage canal on the east side of town. My parents had separated earlier that year, and everything about our life felt temporary, like we were only borrowing space in someone else's reality, waiting for our real life to begin somewhere else. The duplex was old, built probably in the 1950s, with thin walls that transmitted every sound from the neighbors. You could hear their TV, their conversations, their footsteps moving from room to room. My mother hated it, but the rent was cheap and she was working 2 jobs to keep us fed. Marcus and I shared a bedroom, but on weekends I slept on a thin foam mattress on the floor of my mom's room because I had recurring nightmares. She never questioned it, never made me feel weak for needing to be close to her. She just laid out the mattress Friday nights and put it away Monday mornings without comment. One night in early fall, I remember because the air had just started getting cold enough to see your breath, I woke up because something brushed against my foot. At first, still half asleep, I assumed it was Marcus rolling over in his sleep. But then I sat up slightly and remembered he was sleeping in the other room that night. The weekend was over. I was alone on the floor mattress in my mom's room. The mattress was positioned directly under her window, which she kept cracked open a few inches because the house always smelled damp, like mildew and old carpet that never fully dried. I remember hearing a short exhale. Not close, maybe 6 or 7 feet away, but definitely not outside either. The sound was inside the room. I leaned forward slightly and noticed the bedroom door, which my mom always shut completely before sleeping, was now open about 4 or 5 inches. Through the gap, I could see the hallway light glowing faintly, even though she never left it on overnight. We couldn't afford to waste electricity. I called her name once, quietly. "Mom?" She didn't answer. She was facing away from me, still asleep. I called again, louder this time. "Mom?" My voice sounded wrong in the room, too sharp, too awake. Like it didn't belong in the sleeping darkness. That's when I noticed movement in the hallway. Not a clear shape or a defined silhouette, but more like someone shifting their weight backward, just out of the narrow view provided by the cracked door. The hallway light flickered slightly, then steadied. My mom finally stirred and asked groggily why I was sitting up. I told her someone was standing in the hall. She didn't sit up right away. She didn't turn on the light. She just listened. I remember that clearly, the way she held completely still, holding her breath like she didn't want to signal that she was awake. Like she was trying to confirm what I'd said before reacting. Then the floor creaked outside the room. One step, then another. Slow, deliberate footfalls on the old hardwood. My mom reached down and pulled me against her chest, wrapping her arms around me tightly. She whispered that I was probably dreaming, but her hand was shaking enough that I could feel it against my shoulder. The bedroom door began to open wider. Inch by inch, slow enough that I could track the movement in real time. The darkness in the hallway seemed to pour into the room as the gap widened. I saw a man's arm first, pale skin, wearing a dark long-sleeved shirt. Then part of his shoulder came into view as he leaned slightly into the doorway. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't hiding. He was just waiting, watching, like he had all the time in the world. Then the hallway light clicked off. The darkness changed the room instantly, transforming familiar shapes into threatening shadows. My mom tightened her grip around me and shifted her weight like she'd made a decision she didn't want to explain out loud. In the new silence, I heard fabric slide against the wall, the soft whisper of clothing brushing plaster as someone moved closer. The sound was close enough that I could tell exactly where the man was standing without being able to see him. Street light filtered weakly through the window curtains, barely outlining the doorway. The door was now fully open and I could see a shape standing just inside the room. Not moving. Just standing there. My mom whispered my name, not to comfort me but to make sure I was still there, still real, still with her. Then she acted. She slid off the bed and pulled me with her in one motion, keeping my head tucked against her chest. She reached for the lamp on the nightstand and twisted the switch hard. Nothing happened. She tried again, harder, rattling the lamp base. Still nothing. Later, after everything was over, we learned that the plug had been quietly removed from the wall socket. Someone had unplugged it, as if anticipating that they would need darkness. The man stepped fully into the doorway, silhouetted against the faint ambient light from outside. I could see enough to know he was barefoot. His stance was odd, weight balanced evenly on both feet, feet angled slightly inward like he'd been standing in that exact position for a long time. Waiting. He didn't speak. He didn't move closer. He just stood there watching us. Time seemed to stretch and distort. The room held its terrible quiet while we all waited to see what would happen next. My mom leaned down close to my ear and whispered sharply that I needed to go through the window. Right now. Immediately. She pulled the screen loose with one hand, it came away easily like it had been loosened before, and lifted me toward the opening. I was small enough to fit through without difficulty. The drop to the ground outside was short, maybe 4 feet onto dirt and patchy grass. But I landed awkwardly, scraping my knee hard enough to draw blood. I got up anyway and ran toward the neighbor's porch, screaming as loud as I could. I yelled that someone was in our house, that my mom needed help, that we needed the police. Porch lights began flicking on. A man's voice shouted my name, Mr. Kendrick from 3 houses down. Another voice told someone to call 911. By the time police officers arrived, the house was empty. They searched every room, every closet, even the narrow attic access hatch that we rarely used. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows or damaged locks. The back door had been unlocked, though my mom swore, absolutely swore, she had bolted it that night like she did every night. The officers suggested someone might have come in earlier in the day, hidden somewhere, watched our routines, then waited until we were asleep. They told my mom to get better locks and consider a security system we couldn't afford. 2 days later, my brother Marcus found something strange. He was grabbing a jacket from the hallway closet, the one near the water heater, and noticed something behind the tank. A folded blanket that didn't belong to us. Dark blue, clean, deliberately placed. Inside the blanket were a small flashlight, several food wrappers, an empty water bottle, and a spiral-bound notebook. Most of the notebook pages were blank, but a handful had dates written at the top, dates spanning the previous 3 weeks. And our address appeared more than once, along with notations about times and what I now recognize as observations about when we came and went. The police returned and collected the items, photographing everything. They told us again, more seriously this time, that someone had likely been inside the duplex for an extended period, observing our habits, learning our schedule. We never returned to that duplex after that week. We stayed with my aunt and uncle while my mom broke the lease, changed our phone numbers, and found a new apartment on the other side of town with better locks and neighbors we could trust. Even years later, my mom admitted that she sometimes heard subtle movements at night in whatever place we lived, soft enough to dismiss as the house settling or old pipes shifting, but present enough to keep her awake. She never slept with her bedroom door closed again. And she never opened a window at night, no matter how hot it got. I don't know who the man was. I don't know how long he'd actually been living in that house with us, hidden during the days and emerging at night to watch us sleep. I only know that the house never truly felt empty even after we left. And I know that my mom pulled me through that window just in time, before the man standing in the doorway decided to stop watching and start moving closer. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night with the sensation of something brushing against my foot. And for a moment before I fully wake up, I'm 6 years old again on that thin mattress, looking at a door that's opening wider than it should. That was Eden's story, exactly as he sent it to me. He included a final line at the very end that he asked me not to share, but I think about it often. It was a simple question: how many other houses have people living inside them right now in spaces the families don't know about? I don't have an answer for that. And I'm not sure I want one. Story 2, The Visitor at the Door. Let's move toward the second story, shared by someone who signed their email simply as T. No other details, no location, just that single initial and a story that made my skin crawl when I first read it. What struck me about this account wasn't the dramatic events, though those are disturbing enough, but the small, specific details that T remembered, the way the figure moved, the precise timing of the sounds, the horrible realization that came after. Here's Tia's story. A few years ago, I was home alone late at night in my ground floor apartment. It was one of those old converted houses split into 4 units, with thin walls and creaky floors that transmitted every sound from the neighbors above and beside you. My apartment was quiet that night. The kind of deep silence that makes you hyper-aware of every creak and hum. The refrigerator cycling on, the building settling, distant traffic on the main road 3 blocks away. I was sitting in the living room, half watching some forgettable show on TV, half listening to the house settling around me. The night outside was unusually dark and still. No wind, no animal sounds. Just that heavy, expectant darkness that sometimes descends on suburban neighborhoods after midnight. Then the doorbell rang. Just once. Soft but deliberate. A single polite chime. My stomach immediately sank. Whenever I'm home alone, especially at night, I'm extra careful about the door. I never answer without checking first, and I never turn on the porch light until I know who's there. That way, if it's someone dangerous or selling something, they can't see whether the apartment is occupied. I tiptoed to the door without turning on any lights. My apartment's layout means the peephole lines up perfectly with the front walkway, giving me a clear view of anyone standing at the door or nearby. I peered through the peephole. At first I couldn't make out much. The darkness outside was thick, and the single streetlight at the end of the block cast more shadows than illumination. But then my eyes adjusted and I saw it. It wasn't a person. At least, not in any recognizable way. It was a small black shape, roughly 3 or 4 feet tall, positioned just beyond the edge of my walkway. And it was moving. Not walking. Not standing still. Moving in a way I'd never seen anything move before. The shape seemed to be dancing, if you can call it that. Arms, or what I interpreted as arms, were dipping and flaring outward in strange rhythmic motions. Almost like wings, but not quite. The movements were graceful in a deeply unsettling way, sweeping in patterns that didn't feel human or animal. The figure didn't make any sound. The movement was fluid, deliberate, hypnotic. Like it was performing something or communicating in a language I didn't understand. I froze with my eye pressed to the peephole, unable to look away. There's no good way to describe the combination of fascination and pure fear I felt. My rational mind tried desperately to categorize what I was seeing. A neighbor's strange costume, a large trash bag caught in the wind, an elaborate prank. But nothing fit. The movements were too precise, too purposeful. I watched for maybe 10 or 15 seconds, though it felt much longer. Then I couldn't take it anymore and pulled away from the peephole, pressing my back against the door. My heart was hammering. My hands had gone cold. I took several deep breaths, trying to calm down, telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. After about 30 seconds, I forced myself to look again. The figure had vanished. Completely gone. Like it had never been there at all. I scanned the entire visible area through the peephole, the walkway, the small patch of lawn, the edge of the parking area. Nothing. No retreating shape, no shadow disappearing around a corner, no sound of footsteps or movement. Just empty darkness. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and opened the building's security camera app. We had a single camera covering the main entrance to the building, positioned to see who came and went from the 4 units. I rewound the footage to 5 minutes earlier. Nothing. The camera showed an empty walkway. No figure, no movement, nothing approaching my door. I rewound further, thinking maybe I'd miscalculated the time. Still nothing. According to the camera, nobody and nothing had been anywhere near my door for the past 2 hours. But I'd seen it. I'd watched it move. I'd seen those arms sweeping in those impossible patterns. I sat back down on the couch, still shaking, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light. Shadows stretching oddly across the lawn. Exhaustion creating hallucinations. Sleep deprivation playing with my perception. But the memory of those precise movements, the dipping arms, the deliberate rhythm, was etched too clearly in my mind. Whatever it wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. I debated calling someone. My sister maybe, or a friend. But what would I even say? I saw a small black figure dancing on my walkway, but it's not on camera and now it's gone? I decided to stay put. Keep the doors locked. Try to sleep with the TV on for background noise. I turned up the volume slightly and tried to focus on the screen, but my eyes kept drifting to the door. My heart was still racing. Every small sound made me flinch. And then I heard it again. The softest possible knock. Almost like fingernails tapping gently against wood in a deliberate rhythm. Tap, 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 tap. matching the pattern of movements I just witnessed, coming from the door directly behind my couch. My back door. The one that led to the small private patio area behind my apartment. I froze completely. The knock repeated. Same rhythm. Same gentle, precise tapping. I didn't move. I didn't look. I just listened, every nerve in my body screaming. The knocking stopped. I sat there in silence, breathing as quietly as possible, waiting for what would come next. Minutes passed. Maybe 5, maybe 10. The silence stretched unbearably. Finally, moving as slowly and quietly as I could, I crept to the back door. It was solid wood with no window, no way to see outside without opening it. I pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. Complete and total silence. I checked the lock. Engaged. I checked the deadbolt. Locked. I stepped back and stood there in the kitchen, staring at that door, half expecting it to suddenly burst open. It didn't. I went through the entire apartment, checking every window, every lock, every possible entry point. Everything was secure. I turned on every single light in the apartment and went back to the couch, pulling a blanket around me even though I wasn't cold. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute. I sat there with the TV on, lights blazing, listening to every small sound and imagining that small dark figure with its sweeping arms standing just outside my door. Morning finally came. Weak sunlight filtered through the windows, and the apartment slowly returned to normal. The fear receded slightly, replaced by exhaustion and lingering unease. I forced myself to leave the apartment for a few hours, get coffee, walk around, be in public spaces with other people. On the way back, I carefully examined the front walkway and the patio area behind my unit. Nothing unusual. No footprints, no disturbed dirt, no objects that didn't belong there. No evidence that anything had been there at all. I never saw the figure again. But I also never felt completely safe in that apartment afterward. Even with all the doors locked and lights on, I would sometimes pause, listening, wondering if that small dark shape might reappear at my door. Wondering if it was still out there somewhere, moving in those impossible patterns, tapping its rhythm on someone else's door. I moved out 6 months later. I told people it was because I got a better job opportunity across town, but that wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth is that I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. About the way it moved. About the fact that it appeared on my doorstep but not on camera. About the knocking that perfectly matched its movements. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was human wearing something strange, some kind of animal I'd never encountered, or something else entirely. All I know is that it was real. I saw it. I heard it. And I hope I never see anything like it again. That was T.S. account. Short but deeply unsettling. Sometimes the stories that stay with you aren't the longest ones, they're the ones with details you can't explain away. And those rhythmic movements, that precise tapping pattern. Those are details that refuse to fade. Story 3, The Night They Tried to Get In. Time for the third and final story of tonight, shared by someone named Emma. This one is different from the first two in tone but equally disturbing in its own way. Emma was very young when this happened, and you can hear that child's perspective in the way she remembers and describes what occurred. Sometimes I think the scariest stories are the ones filtered through a child's understanding, where the full horror of the situation isn't completely grasped until years later. Here's Emma's story. My name is Emma, and I was 6 or 7 years old when this happened. That makes it about 15 years ago now, but I remember it like it was last week. That night, I was home with my older sister Rachel, who was 14. Our parents often left her in charge for a few hours in the evenings while they worked. We had a system that usually worked fine. Rachel would make dinner, we'd do homework or watch TV, and our parents would come home around 9 or 10. This particular night, we were sitting on the carpet in the living room watching one of those long-form true crime shows on cable. Stories about kidnappings, murders, missing people. I didn't really understand everything, I was too young, but Rachel liked watching them and I liked spending time with her, so I tried to pay attention. Our living room had a big wall of windows and a glass sliding door that led to the backyard. It was pitch dark outside, and with the lights on inside, the windows basically turned into mirrors. I could see our reflection on the glass. Me and Rachel sitting on the floor, the TV flickering, but I couldn't see anything in the yard beyond. The front door was on the other side of the room. It was solid wood with a small window at the top, and there was a storm door outside it, one of those aluminum frame doors with glass that you could lock separately. I didn't like thinking about what might be outside in the dark. I tried to focus on the TV instead. Then all of a sudden the front door shook violently. Bow, bow, bow. 3 heavy impacts that sounded like someone throwing their whole body weight against the door. I screamed. Rachel grabbed me and pulled me against her, wrapping her arms around me tight. Then everything went quiet again. The only sounds were the TV and the little light in the kitchen humming down the hall. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears, in my throat, everywhere. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind, that maybe a branch had fallen against the door. But I knew, even at 6 years old, I knew, that wind didn't hit a door 3 times in perfect rhythm like that. Then I heard it. The storm door outside slowly creaking closed. My stomach dropped. Someone had been standing right there. Someone had hit our door and now they were moving away. My hands felt cold. I stayed crouched on the carpet next to Rachel, frozen, unable to move or speak. Rachel whispered that we should stay calm, that it was probably nothing. But her voice was shaking. I peeked toward the back of the house, toward the glass sliding door, and my stomach sank even further. The doorknob was rattling. Someone was on our back patio trying the door. Testing it. The door was locked. I could see the little latch engaged, but someone was trying to turn the knob anyway. Trying to get in. Bow, bow, bow. The glass shook with each impact. The whole door frame vibrated. I could see my reflection jumping and blurring in the glass every time it was hit. Rachel screamed and pulled me down the hallway toward her bedroom. She shoved her mattress against the door and grabbed the old beige cordless phone with the long metal antenna. She hit redial, calling her friend's number that she'd talked to earlier, and gasped into the phone that someone was trying to break into our house, that we needed help, that our parents weren't home. I curled up on the floor next to the makeshift barricade, shaking, staring at the mattress and trying not to cry. Just when I thought maybe we were safe, that maybe whoever it was had given up and left, I heard something that made my blood turn to ice. Soft footsteps. Inside the house. In the living room. Walking slowly from the front of the house toward the back, toward the hallway where we were hiding. I froze completely. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. Rachel still hadn't noticed. She was focused on the phone, trying to explain to her friend's parents where we lived and what was happening. But I heard the footsteps clearly. They were real. Someone was in the house with us. I wanted to scream, to tell Rachel, but my throat had closed up completely. I couldn't make any sound come out. The footsteps stopped somewhere near the hallway. Waiting. I stayed frozen on the floor, my hands pressed against my knees, trying not to make any noise, trying not to breathe too loudly. Every shadow in Rachel's room seemed alive, stretching and twisting with the dim light coming under the door. My mind kept imagining the door handle turning, the mattress being shoved aside, someone stepping into the room. Then I heard Rachel's friend's mom on the phone saying they were getting in the car right now, that they'd be there in 5 minutes, to stay in the room and keep the door blocked. The footsteps started again. But this time they were moving away back toward the living room. Then I heard the glass door slide open. Someone had unlocked it. From the inside. Then the door slid closed again and everything went silent. The sound of a car engine outside made me almost sob with relief. Headlights swept across the walls, bouncing through the windows. Rachel threw the mattress aside and we ran out together, bursting through the front door just as her friend's parents were getting out of their car. We were both shaking so badly we could hardly explain what happened. The friend's parents checked around the outside of the house and then came inside with us, looking in every room, every closet, under beds. They found nothing unusual. No broken windows, no forced entry. But when we got to the back glass door, it was unlocked. Definitely unlocked, even though I'd watched Rachel check all the doors earlier that evening. There were scuff marks on the bottom of the glass like someone had kicked it or hit it repeatedly. We couldn't tell if those marks had been there before or not. Rachel tried to explain what happened. The banging on the front door, the rattling of the back door, the footsteps inside the house. Her friend's parents looked concerned but also skeptical. I just kept thinking about the footsteps. The way they'd moved through our living room. The way the back door had been unlocked from the inside. We all stood in the living room for a while, checking doors over and over, making sure all the locks were tight. Rachel and I refused to stay there alone. We packed overnight bags and went to her friend's house, and we didn't come back until our parents got home hours later. My parents called the police when they got home and found us gone. The police came and looked around but found no evidence of anyone breaking in. The scuff marks could have been there for weeks. The unlocked door could have been our mistake. They suggested maybe we'd gotten scared watching true crime shows and let our imaginations run away with us. But I know what I heard. I heard footsteps inside our house. And I know that back door was locked when Rachel checked it and unlocked when we ran outside. Someone had been inside with us. Someone who'd banged on the front door to scare us, then circled around to the back while we were distracted. Someone who got inside somehow and unlocked the back door before leaving. I've never forgotten that night. It made me realize how vulnerable you are in your own home, how exposed. Since then, I always lock every door, check every window, pay attention to sounds I might have ignored before. Even now, when I'm home alone, I sometimes think about that night. The banging, the rattling doorknob, the footsteps moving through the house in the dark. And I wonder who it was and what would have happened if Rachel's friends' parents hadn't gotten there when they did. I wonder if whoever it was is still out there, circling houses, testing doors, waiting for the right moment. I still don't know who it was or why they targeted our house. I probably never will. But I learned that night that monsters aren't always imaginary. Sometimes they're real. Sometimes they're standing outside your door, testing the locks, waiting to see if you're paying attention. That was Emma's story. She ended her email with a simple line, "I still check my locks twice before bed, every single night." 3 stories. 3 real experiences that continue to haunt the people who lived through them. A big thank you to Eden, T, and Emma for sharing these deeply personal accounts. It takes courage to revisit moments of genuine fear and vulnerability, and I'm grateful they trusted me to share their stories with all of you. To everyone watching, no matter where in the world you are right now, I hope these stories reminded you to trust your instincts, to pay attention when something feels wrong, to check your locks and know your exits. Fear exists for a reason. It's your brain telling you something isn't right. Don't ignore it. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, please like this video and subscribe. And share your own experiences in the comments. I read every single one, and the best ones might appear in future episodes. This is your storyteller signing off. Stay safe out there. Check your locks. Trust your gut. And remember, the scariest stories are always the ones that actually happened. Until next time.